When a strange red glow first appeared in the sky, the world dismissed it as a passing anomaly, until the light cracked open and revealed something far more intelligent and far more deliberate than any natural phenomenon. What began as a silent shimmer soon spiraled into global panic as electromagnetic storms, falling crystalline particles, and telepathic signals tore through every nation. Scientists, governments, and civilians watched helplessly as the anomaly constructed colossal rings around Earth, preparing the planet for a transformation no one could stop. And when the voice finally spoke, deep, ancient, and undeniable, humanity realized they were not being threatened. They were being claimed. In a surprising turn for the tech world, rising innovator Alden Rocca has officially signed a groundbreaking innovation contract with Vanguard Dynamics, solidifying his role as the company's most valuable creative force. The agreement grants Alden full creative rights and significant control over every invention produced under his name, a rare clause in a corporate environment known for strict ownership rules. During the signing ceremony, CEO Daniel Carter delivered a polished and enthusiastic speech, calling Alden the future of the industry, and praising his extraordinary vision. Cameras flashed as Carter shook his hand, projecting unity and confidence to the media and shareholders. But beneath the surface of celebration, insiders hinted at growing tension. Several members of the legal team were seen exchanging uneasy glances, suggesting disagreements had occurred behind closed doors. One source described the atmosphere moments before the signing as tight, pressured, and unusually cautious. Questions also arose about why the CEO pushed so aggressively for the contract to be finalized before the quarterly board meeting. Observers noted that Carter seemed in a rush, as if securing Alden's signature served a purpose far beyond innovation. As celebrations continued on the surface, whispers within the corridors of Vanguard Dynamics suggested another agenda was unfolding, one that could challenge the very foundation of the contract just signed. Behind the applause, behind the cameras, and behind the CEO's confident smile, something darker was beginning to take shape. In the weeks following the historic contract signing, Alden Rocca's presence inside Vanguard Dynamics grew impossible to overlook. His ideas, once confined to private notebooks, were now powering entire departments, reshaping the company's research agenda overnight. Engineers whispered about his prototypes like legends, claiming some were years ahead of anything on the market. Media outlets quickly picked up on the excitement. Headlines celebrated Alden as a revolutionary force, dubbing him the silent genius behind Vanguard's meteoric rise. Interviews with analysts predicted the company could dominate 3 major tech sectors within a year if Alden's inventions reached mass production. Investors reacted instantly, sending Vanguard's stock price soaring to a record high. Inside the company, however, not everyone welcomed his success. Senior executives who had spent decades climbing the corporate ladder found themselves overshadowed by a newcomer. Meetings grew tense. Compliments became colder. Doors that once opened for Alden without hesitation now required knocking. CEO Daniel Carter, meanwhile, continued presenting himself as Alden's strongest supporter. He praised Alden repeatedly in shareholder briefings, insisting that the inventor embodies the company's future. Yet observers began noticing subtle contradictions. Carter's words were warm, but his eyes grew sharper, calculating, as if tracking every move Alden made. The shift became more obvious when Carter began inserting himself into Alden's project reviews, meetings he had never attended before. What started as polite curiosity slowly turned into intrusive oversight. He questioned Alden's designs, demanded access to confidential drafts, and pushed for accelerated timelines that strained entire teams. Rumors circulated that Carter was preparing a major restructuring of the innovation division. Several managers suddenly received reassignment notices, placing them directly under the CEO's control. Many believed this was no mere administrative reshuffle. It was a tightening of power around Alden's work. Alden himself sensed the shift. The same boardroom where he once felt celebrated now carried an undercurrent of unease. Meetings in which he was formally applauded for bold ideas began to feel like interrogations. Carter's compliments held a sharper edge, as though each praise masked a warning. Despite the growing pressure, Alden continued producing breakthroughs, determined to honor the trust he believed the contract had secured. But even he could not ignore the behavior of the legal department, whose members seemed to monitor him more closely with each passing week. Documents that once required a simple signature now arrived with pages of fine print and addendums. Whispers among staff suggested that certain executives were pushing Carter to take control, before Alden gained too much influence. Some feared the CEO viewed Alden not as an asset but as a threat, one whose popularity could shift the internal balance of power. And so, as Vanguard Dynamics basked in its rapid rise, a silent storm gathered behind the scenes. Alden's innovations were transforming the company, but success had placed him directly in the CEO's line of fire. The stage was set for a confrontation the public couldn't yet see, one that would soon erupt in ways no one could have predicted. The tension that had been quietly coiling around Vanguard Dynamics finally snapped during what was supposed to be a routine quarterly innovation review. Alden Rocca entered the boardroom confident, armed with new prototypes and performance reports that showcased unprecedented progress. Executives sat stiffly around the table, their expressions unreadable. CEO Daniel Carter, positioned at the head, wore a smile that didn't reach his eyes. As Alden began presenting, the room felt strangely cold. His slides revealed numbers so strong they should have ignited applause. Production efficiency up 38%, early patents already attracting international interest, and projections indicating a potential market dominance within the next 18 months. Yet no one congratulated him. Instead, executives exchanged wary glances, like people bracing for something they weren't allowed to stop. Then, without warning, Carter stood. He didn't comment on the results, nor did he acknowledge the success. Instead, he reached for a document on the table, a physical copy of Alden's innovation contract, the same one signed just weeks before. The sound of paper sliding across would echoed sharply through the silent boardroom. Alden's breath caught when he recognized the document. His contract. The agreement that guaranteed him creative control and patent rights. He opened his mouth to speak, but Carter raised a hand, silencing him with a gesture that resembled both authority and threat. In one swift motion, with the entire boardroom watching in stunned disbelief, the CEO tore the contract straight down the middle. The ripping sound cut through the air like a blade, each shred falling onto the polished table like pieces of a shattered promise. Gasps erupted around the room. Someone dropped a pen, someone else whispered, "This is illegal." Carter didn't flinch. He leaned forward, placing his hands on the table. Vanguard Dynamics, he declared coldly, owns everything created under its roof. All patents, all designs, all future developments, effective immediately. His voice carried a dangerous calm, the tone of someone who believed he had already won. Alden felt the weight of betrayal strike him with full force. This wasn't impulsive anger. It was a calculated ambush. The weeks of surveillance, the sudden oversight, the reassignment of managers, the legal team's unusual behavior, it all clicked into place. This move had been planned long before today. Some executives looked horrified, others relieved, as if they had expected Carter to seize control eventually. The legal director avoided Alden's gaze entirely, confirming his suspicion that they knew this was coming. The boardroom, once a stage for progress, had transformed into a battlefield. Alden steadied himself, refusing to show the shock freezing his chest. He gathered the torn pieces of his contract, not with panic, but with a quiet, burning resolve. If Carter believed this act would break him, he had underestimated the man he tried to crush. Because what Carter didn't know, what would soon turn this moment into his greatest mistake, was that the original contract wasn't as fragile as the paper he shredded. A legal trap had been triggered the moment he tore it apart, and the consequences would shake Vanguard Dynamics to its core. The fallout from the boardroom confrontation spread through Vanguard Dynamics like wildfire. By the next morning, whispers of the CEO tearing up Alden's contract had already reached every department. Employees huddled in corners, speaking in low tones, unsure whether they had witnessed a power move or the beginning of a corporate disaster. Rumors churned with every refresh of the internal chat boards. Alden, meanwhile, spent the night in silence, carefully reviewing every clause of the original innovation agreement. The torn paper on the boardroom table might have satisfied Carter's ego, but it meant nothing in the eyes of the law. Hidden deep within the contract was Clause 17B, an automatic reversion clause. A clause Carter had dismissed as standard legal filler. A clause that activated immediately upon a deliberate breach by the company. Before dawn, Alden contacted the law firm that had originally verified the contract. They confirmed what he already suspected. By tearing the contract, Carter had triggered a full legal transfer of all patents, past, present, and future, directly to Alden. And better yet, the contract was digitally time-stamped, encrypted, and stored on a blockchain archive. No CEO tantrum could erase that. By midday, Vanguard's legal department discovered the problem. Panic erupted. Emails flew at lightning speed between executives as they scrambled to understand the consequences. One message leaked almost instantly. "We may have unintentionally transferred patent ownership." Another executive wrote, "Find a way to reverse this immediately." The tone was unmistakable. Fear, desperation, disbelief. Carter, however, refused to accept reality. He summoned the legal team into his office and demanded a solution. But their faces told the truth. There was no loophole. No override. No corporate magic wand to undo what he had done. His impulsive stunt, meant to assert dominance, had legally handed Alden the crown jewels of the company. The CEO's composure began to crack. Witnesses described him pacing the office, muttering that Alden must have manipulated the contract, that this was sabotage, that the board would never accept such an outcome. Yet deep down, he knew the truth. He had walked straight into a legal trap of his own making. Meanwhile, Alden received confirmation from international patent authorities. All 34 patents filed under Vanguard now listed him as the sole owner. His ownership was legally recognized across multiple jurisdictions. The company could no longer use, produce, or profit from his inventions without his written permission. In one night, Alden had become the most powerful individual connected to Vanguard Dynamics. News of the transfer leaked to the media by evening. Headlines exploded. CEO's outburst costs company patent empire. Vanguard Dynamics faces internal crisis after contract breach. Analysts appeared on business channels, calling it one of the most catastrophic corporate miscalculations in recent memory. Inside the company, shock turned into chaos. Engineers halted production. Investors demanded emergency meetings. Board members began to question whether Carter's leadership had become a liability. And Alden, standing calm amid the unfolding storm, realized that the balance of power had shifted entirely. Carter had wanted to crush him. Instead, he had handed him everything. And now the world was watching the empire tremble. The following morning, Vanguard Dynamics awoke to a nightmare it could not contain. At exactly 6:14 a.m., every department received the same automated system notification. Patent access revoked. Authorization required. The engineering floor erupted into confusion as prototypes powered down mid-test. Servers locked themselves, and entire research wings froze like machinery suddenly trapped in ice. Managers sprinted through hallways demanding explanations, but the answer arrived faster than the panic could escalate. A legal bulletin circulated internally, stamped in bold red. Effective immediately, ownership of 34 patents has transferred to Alden Rocca. The message was short, devastating, and irreversible. Overnight, the company's most valuable intellectual property had vanished from its control. Within an hour, the stock market reacted. Vanguard shares plunged violently as analysts scrambled to explain how a single act of corporate arrogance had cost the company billions. Business networks replayed footage of CEO Daniel Carter, smiling, confident, praising Alden as the future, contrasted with headlines accusing him of triggering one of the most catastrophic intellectual property losses in modern tech history. Inside the boardroom, chaos reigned. Executives argued over each other, voices rising, fingers pointing in every direction except inward. One board member slammed a stack of papers onto the table, shouting that the patents represented the beating heart of next year's revenue. Another accused Carter of endangering the entire company for a personal vendetta. No one defended him. No one could. Carter sat silent in his chair, pale and rigid. The betrayal he had orchestrated, the contract he had torn to assert dominance. Those moments replayed in his mind like a cruel echo. He insisted almost desperately that Alden must have set him up, that the clause was hidden deliberately. But the board knew better. They had warned him about acting impulsively. He simply hadn't listened. Meanwhile, Alden remained steady, meeting with legal representatives to ensure every transfer was properly documented. Despite the escalating turmoil, he carried no smugness, no outward satisfaction, only a quiet, firm resolve. This wasn't revenge. It was protection. Protection from a company that had tried to exploit him, then destroy him when he became inconvenient. Media vans soon lined the street outside Vanguard's headquarters. Reporters shouted questions at employees rushing out the doors. Did the CEO really tear up the contract? Is it true the patents are gone? Was Alden forced out? Inside, executives begged the corporate communications team to issue a statement, but no one could agree on what to say, because no spin could hide the truth. Other tech companies wasted no time circling like sharks. Several publicly expressed interest in Alden's newly liberated patents, some even contacting him directly with partnership offers. In a single stroke, Alden had gone from an internal threat to the most sought-after innovator on the global stage. By nightfall, the company's turmoil had escalated into full-blown crisis mode. Emergency meetings stretched into the early hours as Vanguard desperately searched for a way to regain control of what they had lost. But the law was clear. The blockchain timestamps were immutable. The contract breach was undeniable. And so Vanguard Dynamics, once celebrated as a rising titan of innovation, found itself crippled, its empire hollowed out in a single night. All because one man underestimated the person he tried to break. The crisis inside Vanguard Dynamics spiraled into open warfare within days. After losing control of all 34 patents, the company launched an aggressive counteroffensive. One fueled by panic, pride, and the desperate need to save face. Their first move was predictable. A lawsuit accusing Alden of malicious intent and misusing contractual loopholes. But the filing was rushed, poorly constructed, and full of inconsistencies. Legal experts who reviewed it on live broadcasts called it the weakest corporate retaliation in years. Instead of intimidating Alden, the lawsuit only made Vanguard look unstable. Online discussions exploded. Hashtags like #PatentWar, #Alden vs Vanguard, and especially #company checkmate began trending worldwide. Public sentiment shifted sharply against the corporation. Commentators mocked the CEO, saying he had torn up his own company's future more effectively than any rival could have. Still, CEO Daniel Carter refused to accept defeat. He ordered the communications team to initiate a smear campaign targeting Alden's character, painting him as an ungrateful employee and opportunistic inventor. Anonymous sources, clearly orchestrated from inside, began feeding tabloids fabricated stories about Alden being difficult and plotting to leave long before the contract incident. But the smear campaign collapsed almost immediately when footage of the contract-tearing incident leaked. Someone inside the boardroom, an executive fed up with Carter's erratic behavior, sent the video to a journalist. Overnight, the entire world watched the CEO rip a legally binding agreement in half. Public opinion flipped decisively. Alden was no longer just an inventor. He became a symbol of corporate injustice. Meanwhile, Alden's legal team responded with a level of precision that left Vanguard scrambling. They released time-stamped blockchain records proving the contract's authenticity, backed by multiple international legal authorities. They revealed the failure of Vanguard's leadership to review the contract properly. Documents surfaced showing internal warnings sent to Carter before the boardroom incident. Warnings he ignored. Inside Vanguard's headquarters, morale collapsed. Employees reported that high-ranking managers were resigning quietly, fearing future legal implication. Some departments halted work entirely, unsure whether their projects were even legally usable anymore. The company that once boasted about being the future of innovation now faced the possibility of losing its competitive edge for years. Investors, enraged by the falling stock and disastrous PR, demanded explanations from the board. Several major shareholders openly questioned Carter's leadership, calling for an investigation into his decision-making. The board, previously loyal, began to distance itself, releasing subtle statements emphasizing that the CEO acted independently. While the corporation was caught in an internal civil war, Alden moved strategically. Instead of responding emotionally, he released a calm, composed public statement. Innovation should never be controlled by fear. My work belongs where it can create positive impact, not be suppressed for personal gain. The message went viral, shared millions of times within hours. People admired his restraint, contrasting sharply with Carter's chaotic approach. With the public behind him, the law on his side, and the company unraveling under its own decisions, Alden realized something profound. He was no longer fighting to protect himself. He was fighting to expose an entire system built on exploitation. Vanguard Dynamics had launched a war. But every move they made weakened them further. And as the corporate battlefield grew bloodier, one truth became impossible to deny. This was no longer just a fight over patents. It was the beginning of the CEO's downfall. The mounting pressure on Vanguard Dynamics finally hit a breaking point. What began as whispers of discontent inside the company transformed into a tidal wave of accusations. Internal emails leaked, exposing years of manipulative tactics orchestrated by CEO Daniel Carter, ranging from contract tampering to silencing dissenting employees. The public, already outraged, now demanded accountability. Investors who once defended him fell silent, then turned hostile. Board members convened an emergency meeting to address the crisis. Unlike previous gatherings, where Carter commanded the room with intimidating authority, this time he faced cold, unforgiving stares. Financial analysts presented projections showing catastrophic losses if his leadership continued. Legal advisors warned that regulatory agencies were beginning to investigate. For the first time, Carter felt the walls closing in. Still, he attempted to defend himself, blaming Alden, the board, the media, anyone but himself. But his voice trembled as he spoke, the confidence that once defined him reduced to a shadow. A board member cut him off mid-sentence, placing a dossier on the table. Documented evidence of Carter's involvement in multiple internal violations. It was the moment everyone realized his downfall was no longer avoidable. As the boardroom confrontation escalated, a group of executives, previously loyal to Carter, stepped forward to reveal even more damaging information. They disclosed that he had manipulated performance data, pressured legal teams into hiding unfavorable clauses, and sabotaged innovation projects that threatened his authority. It became undeniable that the very leader who demanded absolute control had been the company's greatest liability. Meanwhile, regulatory investigators arrived unannounced at Vanguard's headquarters. They requested financial records, meeting transcripts, and communication logs related to Alden's contract and the recent patent fiasco. Employees watched nervously as officials entered the building, their presence confirming the severity of the situation. Vanguard Dynamics was no longer in crisis. It was under investigation. Outside the corporate walls, the world intensified its scrutiny. News outlets ran exposés detailing Carter's trail of misconduct. Former employees stepped forward, sharing stories of intimidation and retaliation. Social media erupted again, amplifying the newly viral hashtag Carter collapse. Even longtime supporters of the CEO began to distance themselves, claiming they had been unaware of his actions. Alden, though central to the story, remained composed. In interviews, he refused to mock or belittle the failing CEO. Instead, he emphasized the importance of accountability and ethical leadership, earning even greater respect from the public. His calm stance further isolated Carter, who appeared increasingly unhinged each time he attempted to defend himself on camera. In a final act of desperation, Carter attempted to hold a press conference to reclaim the narrative. But halfway through, a journalist confronted him with newly leaked evidence linking him to contract destruction and intentional breach of fiduciary duty. Carter froze, visibly shaken. Cameras capture his panic, his denial, and ultimately, his collapse into incoherent excuses. The footage went viral within minutes. By the end of the week, the board issued its unanimous decision. Daniel Carter was removed as CEO. His badge was deactivated, his access revoked, and his name stripped from all executive documents. As he was escorted out of the building, employees watched in stunned silence. Some felt pity. Most felt relief. A tyrant had fallen. But the consequences didn't end there. In the aftermath of Daniel Carter's removal, Vanguard Dynamics stood like a tower struck by lightning. Still standing, but cracked from foundation to core. Employees wandered the halls unsure whether to feel relief or dread. Investors demanded restructuring. Analysts questioned whether the company could ever recover. And through it all, the weight of the fallen empire seemed to rest on one name: Alden Rocca. Despite the chaos, Alden remained remarkably calm. He watched as headlines shifted from scandal to speculation. Will Alden save Vanguard, or leave it behind? Reporters camped outside his home. Emails poured in from global corporations offering partnerships, leadership roles, even blank checks to acquire his 34 patents. Overnight, he had become one of the most influential innovators on the planet. But Alden knew that power came with responsibility. He had seen firsthand how a corporation's hunger for dominance could corrupt its leaders. He had watched Carter's downfall unravel from ambition twisted into greed. And he vowed, silently and fiercely, never to let his own work be used as a weapon of exploitation again. Meanwhile, Vanguard's board attempted damage control, reaching out to Alden with desperate proposals. They wanted to renegotiate, reacquire, or lease back the patents that once formed the company's backbone. The offers were generous. Astronomically so. Yet every offer carried the same unspoken expectation. Return to the system that tried to destroy him. Alden declined each one without hesitation. Instead, he announced something the industry had not anticipated. In a live broadcast viewed by millions, Alden revealed his plan to launch a new independent tech venture. One built on transparency, ethical innovation, and equal creative rights for all inventors. He emphasized that no contract would be written to trap or silence. No CEO would ever control innovation through fear. It was a direct challenge to everything Carter's regime represented. The announcement shook the industry. Rival companies scrambled to react. Some tried to undermine his credibility, others rushed to praise his vision. Venture capitalists flooded his inbox with investment offers. But Alden was selective. He didn't need just money. He needed partners who understood the mission. Those who didn't were politely turned away. As weeks passed, Alden's new startup, Eclipse Innovations, took shape at remarkable speed. Engineers who had quietly admired him from afar applied in droves. Former Vanguard developers resigned and joined him, some calling it liberation. Creative minds from around the world volunteered, eager to work under a leader who valued integrity over hierarchy. The momentum was unstoppable. Public excitement surged as rumors circulated about the technology's Eclipse Innovations would unveil. Some whispered that a prototype Alden had shelved during the Vanguard conflict was finally coming to life. Others speculated that the 34 patents would be combined into a revolutionary system capable of changing multiple industries at once. Whatever it was, people knew it would be monumental. And while Eclipse rose, Vanguard struggled. The once powerful corporation now limped through damage assessments, legal fees, and plummeting investor confidence. Many saw the contrast as poetic justice. The company that tried to bury a visionary had ended up burying itself. Carter's downfall had become a permanent stain on its legacy. Finally, in a moment that captured global attention, Alden delivered a closing message in a televised interview. Calm, confident, and resolute, he said the words that would echo across social media, business schools, and tech forums for years to come. When they tore up my contract, they tore open their downfall. Innovation should never be controlled by fear, and never again will I let it be. That quote ignited the internet. The hashtag company checkmate exploded once more, now symbolizing not just victory, but reinvention, justice, and the reclaiming of one's future. And with that, the story of Alden versus Vanguard ended. Not with revenge, but with rebirth. The world had witnessed the collapse of a corrupt empire and the rise of a visionary who refused to be broken. The new era he created was only beginning. The world awakened to an even darker horizon as the crimson anomaly, once a distant glow, now pulsed violently across half the sky. Broadcast stations struggled to maintain calm, but the rapid shift in the phenomenon's behavior sent shockwaves through every nation. The sense of approaching inevitability, once theoretical, now felt like a countdown. At precisely 4:17 Greenwich Mean Time, seismic sensors worldwide detected synchronized tremors, all pointing toward the upper atmosphere rather than the Earth's crust. Scientists admitted they had never seen such readings before. It's not an earthquake, it's something pressing from above, one analyst whispered off-air, unaware his microphone was still live. The Global Observatory released a chilling update. The object behind the red light had expanded threefold overnight. Telescopes captured the silhouette of something enormous, mechanical in structure, yet emitting organic movement. Chapter 8's final warning from Dr. Alvaro echoed through social media. If it continues this fast, we may run out of time. Crowds formed in major cities, some praying, some shouting, others simply staring upward in silent disbelief. Governments deployed emergency units not for defense, but to prevent panic from spiraling out of control. The fear was no longer about what was coming. People feared when it would reach them. In a sudden broadcast interruption, every screen turned black before displaying a wave of static. Analysts later confirmed that the interference matched the same frequency as the atmospheric anomaly. It's communicating, Dr. Alvaro declared during an emergency briefing. And whatever it is, we've just received its first signal. The signal, decoded over the course of 3 agonizing minutes, was not a message in words, but a pattern. A repeated, escalating tone that mirrored a heartbeat. Except it was slowing down, as if something colossal was preparing to awaken. Experts linked the signal to the data discovered at the end of Chapter 8, confirming this was no natural phenomenon. Military satellites attempted to scan the object, but their systems malfunctioned simultaneously. Several nations reported losing entire orbital fleets within seconds. It was as if the anomaly reached out and silenced anything that tried to observe it too closely. Rumors spread of a cosmic blackout, though officials refused to confirm it publicly. Panic escalated when eyewitnesses in the northern regions reported massive drops of molten debris raining from the sky. These fragments, glowing like liquid metal, evaporated before touching the ground. Specialists believe they were shed from the object itself, as though it was discarding or reshaping parts of its structure. Dr. Alvaro returned for another statement, visibly shaken. His voice trembled as he revealed the most alarming discovery yet. The anomaly was not stationary, it was descending. Not rapidly, but deliberately, with a precision that suggested intelligence. "We have to accept the possibility," he said. "This is not an accident. This is an arrival." As night fell, the red light intensified to a blinding glare, casting long shadows across the continents. As dawn approached, the red sky fractured with thin jagged lines of white light, like cracks forming on the surface of a colossal cosmic shell. The phenomenon was no longer a distant threat but a visible structure collapsing inward. News anchors across the globe struggled to remain composed as the world realized the anomaly was beginning to open. The Global Observatory confirmed the unimaginable. The massive form behind the red veil was undergoing a structural shift, rotating slowly as if preparing to reveal its core. "This is not descent anymore," Dr. Alvaro announced shakily. "This is activation." Scientists described the event as the point where natural science reached its limit, and something else took over. Satellites that survived last night's blackout transmitted a final image before shutting down. A circular aperture forming at the center of the anomaly, stretching wider each minute. The curvature looked engineered, not organic, and carried the unmistakable signature of intentional design. The world was witnessing the birth of an unknown gateway. Panic erupted in cities as the aperture emitted an enormous shockwave. Though silent, the tremor rippled through buildings like invisible thunder. People stumbled, alarms blared, and windows shattered. Experts warned that the shockwave appeared to be a scanning pulse, mapping the Earth with an intelligence far beyond human comprehension. Airports were flooded with desperate crowds, though no aircraft dared to fly. Governments had issued grounding orders after 2 jets vanished from radar directly beneath the anomaly's centerline. Officials described it discreetly as a complete extraction, but leaked footage revealed the truth. The jets were absorbed into the expanding aperture without leaving debris. Meanwhile, astronomers detected a new development that stunned even the most skeptical minds. Objects, small, sharp and metallic, were emerging from the aperture and suspending themselves motionlessly in the upper atmosphere. These fragments formed symmetrical patterns, like a geometric constellation. "They're arranging themselves," NASA stated. "This is construction." Reports from northern regions intensified as witnesses described beams of crimson light descending silently from the sky. These beams did not burn or destroy. Instead, they scanned landscapes, tracing the contours of mountains, forests, and oceans. The beams behaved like probing eyes, gathering information with surgical precision. Dr. Alvaro's emergency briefing took a grim turn when he confirmed that Earth's magnetic field had begun fluctuating wildly. Compasses spun uncontrollably, navigation systems collapsed, and migratory wildlife scattered in chaotic patterns. "The anomaly is rewriting the electromagnetic equilibrium," he said. "This could be a prelude to full planetary integration, or eradication." The most terrifying moment came when the aperture pulsed a second time, brighter and sharper than before. The pulse carried a low, resonant hum that vibrated through the ground and echoed inside human chests like a second heartbeat. Millions collapsed, clutching their heads, reporting the same sensation. Something is calling. The world held its breath as the colossal metallic wheel above Earth completed its rotation and locked into place. A blinding arc of light surged across its surface, forming symbols no human language had ever recorded. Scientists scrambled to analyze the shapes, but before any conclusion could be announced, the symbols began to pulse rhythmically, like a coded heartbeat. At 3:14 Greenwich Mean Time, every broadcasting system on Earth, from satellite TV to broken emergency radios, lit up simultaneously with a sharp static screech. The noise was not random. Spectrogram analysis revealed precise mathematical intervals, as though an intelligence was transmitting the first structured message to humanity. Moments later, the static evolved into a low, resonant tone. Windows shook. Concrete vibrated. Millions reported feeling the sound inside their bones rather than through their ears. Hospitals became overwhelmed as people collapsed from vertigo, nosebleeds, or an overwhelming sensation described as direct communication through the mind. In the command center, Dr. Alvaro stared at the incoming signal with horror. "This is not a broadcast," he whispered. "This is a synchronization attempt." The tone was aligning biological brainwaves across the planet, forcing a unison that no species had ever experienced. Experts warned that if the signal intensified, it could suppress individual consciousness entirely. The sky erupted with threads of red lightning that spiraled around the metallic wheel, forming a vortex of crackling energy. Unlike natural lightning, these bolts traveled upward, as if feeding power into the construct. Entire regions flickered with momentary darkness as power grids failed in cascading waves. For the first time, military forces worldwide authorized full defensive readiness. Jets were deployed but refused to approach the anomaly after sensors malfunctioned and pilots reported intense hallucinations. One pilot's last transmission chillingly stated, "It's speaking inside the cockpit. Not through the radio, inside me." Meanwhile, the metallic fragments suspended across the sky began descending in perfect formation. They hovered just above major cities, New York, Tokyo, London, Jakarta, Sao Paulo, casting enormous, cold shadows. Panic exploded as people feared an imminent attack. But the fragments did not fire. They remained motionless, as though waiting for a command. Then, without warning, the fragments emitted narrow beams of white light that pierced the streets below. Unlike the earlier red scans, these beams interacted with physical matter, lifting cars, street signs, and debris into the air. Objects hovered weightlessly, frozen, as if gravity itself had been rewritten. As scientists scrambled to decipher the behavior, the global signal shifted again. This time, it wasn't sound. It was a voice, deep, layered, and impossible to identify as male or female. The message echoed across every speaker, device, and human mind. Phase 1 complete. Planetary integration initiated. The moment the fragments formed planetary rings, the Earth's atmosphere responded violently. Jet streams twisted into unnatural spirals, storms formed instantly over multiple continents, and the temperature dropped 4 degrees in just 30 minutes. Meteorologists called it the atmospheric submission, as if the planet itself was adjusting to a foreign command. Emergency broadcasts blared worldwide, urging civilians to stay indoors, but even sealed buildings could not block the vibrating hum that now pulsed through the air. People reported hearing whispers overlapping the hum, thousands of voices murmuring in unison, some pleading, some warning, others simply repeating names that no one recognized. In laboratories, scientists watched in terror as the electromagnetic field dipped again, this time revealing faint circular patterns glowing across the sky. Satellites detected these patterns expanding around Earth like a planetary blueprint. The rings above were no longer just structures. They were mapping the surface as if preparing to shape it. The metallic wheel at the center of the anomaly began rotating once more, but this time each rotation produced an avalanche of cascading white particles. At first they resembled snow, but microscopes quickly revealed they were engineered microstructures, tiny crystalline lattices capable of rewriting chemical composition on contact. "This isn't weather," a researcher whispered. "This is terraforming." Panic erupted when the particles entered the oceans. Within minutes, coastal waters turned from blue to luminescent silver, pulsing with inner light. Marine biologists watched helplessly as sonar readings showed the ocean floor shifting. Monolithic structures rising beneath the waves, moving with purpose. Governments attempted a coordinated counterstrike. Missiles were launched at the metallic wheel, but every projectile dissolved into white dust before reaching its target, absorbed by an invisible barrier. Analysts cried out as the dust reassembled itself midair, folding into the same crystalline structure falling from the anomaly. "It's learning," someone whispered. "It's copying our attacks." Cities fell into chaos when communication satellites finally collapsed. Networks died simultaneously, plunging the world into a digital silence not seen in centuries. Only emergency analog systems survived, and even those flickered as if the anomaly was draining the last remnants of Earth's independent signal. Then came the rupture. A violent tear split across the center of the metallic wheel, opening like a colossal iris. Inside the tear, observers saw not machinery or darkness, but a swirling chamber filled with blinding gold light, shifting like a star being born. The chamber pulsed with a slow, deliberate rhythm, each pulse shaking the planet's crust. Tens of thousands fell to their knees as a new voice, deeper and more resonant than the first, flooded the air and echoed inside every mind. The words vibrated through bone and stone alike. Phase 2 commencing. Biological assimilation scheduled. The temperature dropped again, and the sky dimmed as the chamber widened.